and you want to get more money and funding for your real estate deals without relying on banks, without relying on hard money lenders, don't go anywhere because I'm getting ready to plug you into the money. Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of Real Estate Investing with Jay Conner. I'm Jay Conner, the Private Money Authority, and I'm the host of the show here, and I want to welcome you. If you're brand new to the show, a very special welcome to you. We talk about all things related to real estate investing, from single-family houses to commercial deals to land to all kinds of self-storage. I mean, you name it, we talk about it. And of course, we talk a lot about funding for your deals. I'm known as the Private Money Authority. Way back in 2009, I was relying on the local banks and mortgage companies to fund my real estate deals, and I was cut off. My lines of credit were closed with no notice. I had to find a better way to fund my deals. Well, I was introduced to this wonderful world of private money, which has got nothing to do with hard money, banks or mortgage companies. And I was able to raise over $2 million in less than 90 days. And since that time, way back in 2009, I have not missed out on a real estate deal because I didn't have the funding. So as a result, I have just released my brand new book, which is called Where to Get the Money Now. And the subtitle is How and Where to Get Money for Your Real Estate Deals Without Relying on Traditional or Hard Money Lenders. And because you are tuning into the show, I want to send you a free copy of this book. If you'll just cover the cost of delivery, I want to send you a free copy. And here's how you can get it. Go to www.jayconner.com/book, B-O-O-K. That's Jay Conner, JayConner.com/book, B-O-O-K, and we'll rush the book right out to you. This book is going to reveal to you how to quickly locate existing private lenders and also how to attract your own private lenders right in your own backyard. I'm also going to teach you in the book the 5 steps that I used and I still use this day to attract unlimited funding. So again, my gift to you at www.jayconner.com/book. So if you have been tuning into the show, we are almost right here at our 3-year mark. You know I have amazing guests join me here on the show, and today is no exception. My good friend and special guest is and has been a full-time investor. He lives down in Tampa, Florida with his wife and 2 children. And for the past 16 years, he has bought and sold, listen to this, more than $100 million worth of real estate in the United States and the UK markets. And that includes over 350 fix and flips just in Tampa, and that was just between 2015 and 2020. In addition to that, my special guest has got experience in a wide variety of real estate related activities, including buy and hold, fix and flip, wholesaling, tax liens, tax deeds, foreclosure auctions, and isn't that timely right now, note investing, my favorite subject, private lending, and much more. In addition to that, my guest is a licensed realtor in the state of Florida. He enjoys podcasting, networking with fellow professionals, and generally creating useful content for those who want to achieve financial freedom before they get too old to enjoy it. And so with that, folks, I'm so excited to have on the show here my friend and expert, Colin Murphy. Colin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jay. It's an honor to be here.
Well, it's an honor to have you. And I tell you, folks, we're going to be picking Colin's brain, and he is more than qualified to answer these questions. On this show, we're going to be talking about the foreclosure market, how things are going to be, or what Colin foresees happening in the next few months. Colin's got a lot of experience in bidding at auctions or foreclosure auctions. He's going to pull the skin back, pull the banana peel back, and reveal to us some very, very important lessons and mistakes that he made in foreclosure auctions and how you could avoid those as well. In addition to that, He has scaled a business down in Tampa to where he's able to do over 100 flips a year. And we sure want to hear about that as well. But Colin, you originally hail from Ireland, right?
Yeah, that's right. I lived there for the first 23 years of my life, and that's why the accent is still there and I'm not going anywhere.
So how in the world did you make it to the States and why?
Well, real estate is what brought me over here, Jay, and I've been passionate about real estate since I was in my early 20s. And I got into the real estate game in London. I went there as a young man after university and started working on a real estate magazine, selling adverts in magazines and trying to convince people to take up exhibition space at real estate shows in the UK and Ireland. And I got to travel literally all over the world, convincing realtors, brokers, builders, currency people in places like Spain and Italy and Florida and Eastern Europe and South America. And I was trying to bring all these people to London to come to all these shows, and in Ireland as well. And I did that for a few years, and it was a fantastic way of learning the real estate business, probably an unusual way of learning the real estate business, but it was a kind of a high-powered, work hard, play hard sales environment. And after a few years of that, I opened an office in Dublin for a company that did emerging market real estate development in Eastern Europe and South America, and I sold their products to the Irish market. This is in the mid-2000s, so 2005 and 6 and 7. There was a huge real estate boom in Europe at that time, same as in America, Jay. And once the credit crunch hit, our business model pretty much evaporated sometime between March in 2008 when Bear Stearns failed and September 2008 when Lehman Brothers failed. And so we had to pivot, and we pivoted to Florida. And that was the place where we set up a brand new business in January 2009 in Florida real estate, and pretty much haven't looked back since.
So, when you said your business model really went away, what did your new business model have to be in contrast to what the business model was?
So we pretty much had to do the opposite of everything we used to do, which was to go from selling pre-construction, emerging market real estate, which was very kind of lifestyle orientated, to selling completely built and tenanted first world market real estate with income generation already in place. So instead of selling kind of this will be built in 3 years and the cost is $200,000, this is built now and 30 cents on the dollar, and there's somebody in there on a 1-year lease paying $900 a month, and it's in Florida, the most, safest, most internationally recognized real estate market in the world. There certainly was back in 2009 when people were nervous about even leaving money in the bank account.
Well, there's one thing about investing in a property that already exists versus having to go build a new one. Like what's going on today? Lumber has gone up, astronomically high, right? I heard a recent statistic that the average medium price house alone, just because of lumber, is more than $30,000 more than it was a year ago, just because of the lumber. But you know what? When you invest in an existing family house or whatever, or a commercial, the lumber's already there.
It is. The only difference I've noticed, I buy a lot of houses, I put on a lot of roofs. So the roof prices have gone up quite a bit because of the lumber. So what used to be a $10,000 roof is now a $12,000 roof. So it's not as dramatic as a $300,000 house is now $330,000. But you still notice that difference in the lumber prices. It's crazy, but it's just affected me a little bit. The kind of extra money it costs to put on a roof has more been compensated by literally just the appreciation that's happening in the market.
Exactly. Now you have got a ton of experience, Colin, and I want our listeners to really learn some lessons from your experience. You've got a ton of experience in foreclosures, bidding at auctions and et cetera. But before we get into the lessons learned about that, this is a very, very timely subject, especially with us, having COVID in the near, in the recent past, coming out of the pandemic and et cetera. So first, let's get you to tell our listeners, what does your crystal ball say about the foreclosure market? Where do you see it today? Where do you see it going in the near future and say over the next few months or a year, a couple of years?
Yeah, first of all, I wish I had a crystal ball. That would be pretty handy, because where we are now is not where I thought we were going to be 9 months ago or 12 months ago. So where auctions are at the minute, and I'm talking about, Florida auctions. Florida is a judicial state, so the foreclosure process moves quite slowly. And the inventory levels in the foreclosure auctions are a small percentage of what they used to be, maybe 5% of the available properties at auction compared to about 2 years ago. And then, the best time to be buying foreclosure auctions in Florida anyway was maybe back in 2012 or 2013, when about 40% of all real estate transactions were some kind of distress, whether that was a short sale or an REO or a foreclosure. There literally was, and just to give you an example, in one little county in Tampa that I specialize in called Pasco County, you generally might have about 260 properties a month back in the good old days. And then when you fast forward to kind of 2018, 2019, you're probably looking at 80 auctions a week, something like 70 or 80 auctions a week. So only about 25% of what it was at the peak. And nowadays, Jay, it's literally about 10 auctions a week in Pasco County. So just like a couple per day. So it's really slow to an absolute trickle. Sometimes you might read misleading headlines in CNBC or some of the real estate places where they might say, foreclosure auctions in Florida have shot up, 50%. And what's really happened is they've gone from having like 4 per week to 10 per week. And that sounds dramatic percentage wise, but when you really compare to where we were, compared to the amount of foreclosures in a normal market where you don't have all of these, foreclosure moratoriums and everything else, we're nowhere near where we used to be. It's just slow to a trickle. And in terms of where it's going to go, for sure, we're going to see more foreclosure opportunities, more opportunities to invest in foreclosure properties, because there has been a fantastic source of inventory for my business over the last 6 years in particular. And it will increase from today's very, very low levels, because the government is artificially holding that volume down with the amount of foreclosure moratoriums. People can literally postpone their mortgage payments for 1-2 years, whereas before, 9 months after stopping your mortgage, you're going to be listed in a foreclosure auction in Florida. And that's the opposite has happened now. And when you have unemployment, rising as sharply as it did in the last year, obviously the recovery has been pretty impressive, but the amount of people out of work now compared to a year and a half ago is still dramatically different. You're talking about millions and millions of households. That's the biggest predictor of mortgage defaults. So you are going to see an increase in foreclosures for sure. I don't necessarily think it's going to be a tsunami of them. I don't necessarily think you're going to see massive price drops like we saw 10 years ago, because there are a bunch of things that are different now.
Yeah, I agree. So how quickly or slow do you think it's going to move from now, or do you even have a guess?
I see it seeing the inventory at the minute is as low as it's ever been. It's literally lower now than it was even 4 or 5 months ago. So I can see that continuing for much of this year. And then I'm hoping that, and I'm talking to some people, some foreclosure attorneys, people that are more familiar with the backlogs that are in the courts here. I'm hoping it's going to start, increasing in Q4 2021 and Q2 2022. So I think really next year is when you're going to see that increase in inventory. And to be honest with you, I think the market is able to absorb a pretty big increase in inventory, because it is so low at the minute. We're at, a couple of months worth of inventory, and there's certainly demand for much more. And when you have that amount of kind of pent up demand, you have to figure that prices should hold pretty steady. So my ideal scenario, Jay, is having loads more foreclosures that are available for me to buy, and I'm able to sell them at top dollar afterwards.
Absolutely. Well, there's 2 categories of foreclosures from my observation. You got all of these people that were already in foreclosure before the pandemic came along, in March 2020. And then pandemic comes along, and now you got this whole nother new category of people in foreclosure that are in foreclosure or will be in foreclosure because of going on unemployment or whatever. But I agree with you, Colin. I don't believe we're going to see what we saw with the glut of foreclosures as we saw back in 2007, 8, and 9. That was a different scenario. And plus, when those foreclosures came along way back then, we didn't have the low inventory like we've got right now.
Yeah, and not only that, but it's very difficult to envision a situation, certainly in Florida, where huge amounts of people will be underwater on their mortgage, where the value of the amount of money they owe on the property is higher than the value of the property. We saw a lot of that in 2009, 10, and 11, where people had $200,000 mortgages on a house that was now worth 130. So nobody's going to sell that. I mean, it's going to end up in a foreclosure more likely than not. But nowadays you have a lot of people that can't pay their mortgage, but it might be $200,000 mortgage, but the house is worth maybe 250 or 280. So as long as people aren't, those who don't have their head in the sand will just list that property for sale and start renting somewhere. And unfortunately, you do have a lot of people with heads in their sand through, just death, drugs, divorces, all that sort of stuff. And they just refuse to pay their mortgage, refuse to list their house for sale, refuse to face reality. It's just going to be a ton of those coming out. But for the regular folks that just lost their jobs, can't pay their mortgage, but are not totally unattached to reality, the easy thing to do is list the house for sale, because it doesn't really matter what condition it's in. You're more than likely going to be able to sell it for more than the mortgage value, unless something changes pretty dramatically.
So, Colin, let's move to, let's just pretend, right, that the foreclosure market has opened up and auctions are going on, okay? And they will be. You've got a lot of experience in that, and you've got some really, really important lessons learned from mistakes that you made early on when you were at the foreclosure auctions. So share with us some insights that people could learn from in order to avoid doing some of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've made a lot of mistakes, and if people told you that they haven't made many mistakes, the chances are that they haven't done much in general, because that's how you learn, is by doing all this stuff and figuring it out. If you can learn from other people's mistakes, that's well and good, but you tend to learn from your own a lot more. Buying in the foreclosure auctions is not real estate 101. It is relatively advanced. You do need to pay cash for the property on the same day the auction occurs. You literally need to be bidding at 11 o'clock in the morning and wiring your purchase price at 4 p.m. You're stuck with any kind of unpaid property taxes, unpaid utility bills, unclear title chains. I mean, you're stuck with all of that. So you need to be very good at researching chain of title in the property. And, the biggest mistakes, we made early on were getting some of the basic stuff wrong, was just assuming, getting the renovation numbers wrong. You're taking a look at a property that might be occupied and you might think, oh, that roof looks okay. And then you buy it and it turns out it's not okay at all. So there's an extra $10,000 on your renovation budget. Or it might have been vacant for several years and you think you're just going to get, start renovation straight away. But, one thing you need when you start renovation is utilities. You need to turn them on. And there could be enormous unpaid utility bills with properties running into the thousands of dollars that you're on the hook for. You're literally, the water company for that street has a monopoly on water to your property. And if they're saying you need to pay us $3,500, $4,000, which happened to me several times, or we're not turning on the water, they kind of got you. You're going to have to do it. Just buying properties with people in them. The eviction process can be quite long and tedious. You might think, some people might tell you it takes 4 weeks, but realistically it might take 8 or 9. I bought, ones with large unpaid HOA bills. I've bought properties where we didn't do, check the permit information properly, where you might think there's a 2016 AC, but that might have been for some minor AC repair, not a brand new system. We've bought properties where, there was subsidence repairs, literally, sinkhole issues with them that we didn't notice, because you thought you were buying in Newport Richey, but you're actually buying in the city of Newport Richey, which is this little 10-block radius with its own little permit office that you forgot to check. So, you really need to have, you go through enough of these, Jay, and then you tend to get a long checklist of things that you need to go through before you bid on a property. And title is a crucial one, but also just getting better at estimating the renovation cost of a property, because that's not always easy with a foreclosure, because they're often occupied. And even if they're not occupied, they're usually often totally boarded up and you don't know what's going on inside. So yeah, I've run the full gamut. I've made a lot of, $5,000 to $15,000 mistakes in foreclosure auctions. Thankfully, I haven't made any $50,000 mistakes in foreclosure auctions, but the people that do those are the ones that might buy a second mortgage and are still responsible for the first mortgage, or might, think that they're bidding on the property, but they're bidding on a HOA foreclosure and they're still stuck with the mortgage. A very rookie mistake to make is you've done all your work and you've got all your numbers down and you really want to buy a property, but you don't have enough money in deposit on your foreclosure account because you forgot to top it up the last time you bought a property. I've done that one too, and everybody's been super annoyed because you're sending field guys out there to look at it. You're getting attorneys to check title on you. You're getting other people to crunch numbers and input permit information. And then when you're about to bid, you realize, oh my God, I don't have enough money in the account for a deposit. So a lot of stuff, a lot of silly mistakes over the years, but the good ones outweigh them, I guess.
Well, Colin, I tell my students all the time that you always show up. As when I say you, I mean your last name, Murphy, shows up in every house. Do you know who the Murphy is that I'm talking about?
Oh, whatever can go wrong will go wrong.
That's it. I say sometimes Murphy shows up, sometimes Murphy's cousins show up, sometimes Murphy's grandparents show up. So with that in mind, we always want to account for the unexpected. So when you are, so let's do a scenario, okay? Let's say that you are looking at a foreclosure that you are interested in putting a bid on, and let's say it's occupied, let's say you can't get in there. So what is your formula? What is your calculation? How do you decide what is the most that you're going to bid on that property, given the fact you can't get inside? What's that formula look like?
Well, let's assume that you or an attorney can do a title check, so you can make sure that property taxes are up to speed, or that there's no unusual liens or unpaid utility bills. Let's just assume that side is okay. So now you need to work out two main things. What's it worth after being renovated, and how much is it going to cost to renovate it? And obviously that's not easy if you can't get inside. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to look at the MLS to see, has it been sold in the last 15 years, and get a look at some previous listing photos, because maybe it was sold in 2010 and 13 and 15, or maybe it was listed for rent, or maybe it was listed and taken down. But you can see certain things like, has it got some tile floors? Was the kitchen modernized in 2015? What is it, how old? You can look online, see how old is the roof and the AC. They're major big ticket items. So sometimes you get an idea from that, but a house could look great in 2016 or 2017, and the wrong kind of person lives there for 3 years, and you're back to square one. So more often than not, we're kind of, with the exception of kind of roofs and ACs, which you can kind of tell from permit records and drive-bys. So once you drive by a property, if it's nice and clean outside with landscape gardens and a nice car in the driveway, and there's a little bit of curb appeal, it's more likely to be quite nice inside as well. Maybe a little dated, but if it's taken care of outside, it's taken care of inside. But if you're driving past and there's some big dogs and there's a bunch of junk in the front yard, a bunch of tires and mattresses and riffraff, it's going to be pretty similar inside as well. But for the most part, you need to know what's it going to cost to renovate a kitchen in this area, to paint a house in this area, to replace the floors, replace the bathrooms, light fixtures, window repairs, fences, landscaping. You need to know your numbers for all of those. And one thing that stood to our benefit was that we specialized in a particular part of Tampa where there was tons of houses that were the same. So renovating hundreds of these single story 1970s concrete block 1,100 to 1,500 single family homes with 2 or 3 crews, and we kind of knew those costs very well. So once you know those costs, you generally are safe to assume you're going to need everything, unless there's a 1-year-old MLS photo showing different. And then you allow your holding costs, your insurance costs, your private money costs, your sales costs on the other side, and you just work out a bid price after you plug all those numbers in, and just be conservative. I mean, let's just say I've been unpleasantly surprised far more often than I've been pleasantly surprised once you get into a house that you've bought sight unseen. I mean, literally 1 or 2 out of maybe 150, I've walked in and it's like, oh my God, I literally just need to clean this house and it's good to go. And it's just high fives all around. But sometimes you might think, I saw a picture 2 years ago and that kitchen looks pretty good. I think we might get away with it. Most of the time you walk in and no, you got to tear it out,
Well, you said something a moment ago that actually goes against the grain of one principle that most people have heard, and that is you can't judge a book by its cover. But I did hear you say when it comes to foreclosures, if the outside is looking pretty good, chances are the inside's looking pretty good, right?
That has been surprisingly consistent over the years. I mean, it is a very good rule of thumb, certainly in suburban, middle class areas where I operate. It tends to be that way.
So in this market today, Colin, as we wrap up here, in this market today, are you more prone to buy and hold, or are you more prone to flip, or does it depend?
The older I get, the more I kind of regret not holding more, because when you're flipping 100 houses a year, that's a lot of income. That's a lot of nice money you can use to live in a nice house, send your kids to nice schools, go on overseas trips and all that kind of stuff. And I'm very grateful for that. But that's, to get wealthy, you need to own property for a long period of time. And there's a bunch of other tax benefits from owning property. So I'm much more inclined to own, to keep the properties I have. For example, I've got 7 in the pipeline now. I'm keeping 3 of them, and I'm trying to kind of operate on that kind of mindset. Whereas before I literally used to sell 80 and keep 3, or 2. I can't tend to forget that, whether I could either sell it now for a quick, say, $35,000 profit, or I could keep it. And so I used to think, well, I'm not getting the 35,000, but of course you are. It's still there. It hasn't gone anywhere. You just decided not to cash it in yet and pay taxes on it yet. So if you have enough money coming in from some other stuff, or if you need 1 or 2 flips, will keep you going. I think if you focus on a plan for building that wealth and building those passive income streams, it's much better. So I'm much more focused, especially with inventory being so low. If I get a great house, I'm much more inclined to keep it now than I would have been before.
Yeah, well, what you just said reminds me of the principle that is the case in most cases, and that is the longer you own a property, the more profitable it is.
Yes, sir.
For many reasons that you just said. Colin, thank you so much for joining me on the show. Parting comments, my friend.
Parting comment. Any kind of main piece of advice for your listeners would be to, that a healthy attitude to risk is essential, I think. If you aren't prepared to take some risk, you'll probably end up working for someone who is. And, kind of in parallel to that, try and develop some resilience. I think it's more important than being really smart or being lucky. It's just being resilient, that if you're able to keep going when other people give up, and just do that. And the third thing, Jay, is just get a good night's sleep. Do some exercise. That'll give you a lot more clarity on your thoughts and your goals, and getting good stuff done in the day ahead.
I love the way you think, Colin. Tell everybody one more time about your podcast and how they can follow you on your podcast.
Yeah, I do a real estate podcast. I love talking to people, really, guys like yourself, Jay, and I have a podcast just called Colin Podcast about real estate. So I love inviting experts from all walks of life, whether that's note experts, lenders, fix and flippers, wholesalers, coaches, realtors, property managers, you name it. I just love quizzing them, asking them what I want to ask them. They're all fascinating people. So if you just plug in Colin Podcast about real estate, you'll see that. And you'll also get them all on my website, which is just colininvestments.com. You'll see all the videos and reports and audio links and anything else you want to do.
That's awesome. Colin, it's been just amazing to have you here on the show, and I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you.
All right. Well, there you have it, folks. Another episode of Real Estate Investing with Jay Conner. I'm Jay Conner, the Private Money Authority, wishing you all the best. Here's to taking your real estate investing business to the next level, and we'll see you on the next show.